am Stonewall and joined as well as God. From here, I get a sweep of the whole right without the bed. Without a small room of light in the mirror.
Hey everybody, welcome back. As you can see, I am alone today. There was the potential of missing a week, but Daryl and I decided that I was going to just insert something here that we're going to talk about together next week. She's on her way home from Mexico, but we didn't want you to miss a week. So I want to go through a few things with you. I'll make this relatively short. I'm going to put a full Rumble video together, but I thought that I would give you guys a little sneak preview. So maybe you guys have seen this headline, this MAGA influencers may have been paid to split or break with RFK. I want to go through this with you because I think it's really interesting. And I want to start just by telling you a quick story. This is a story about thinking for yourself, labels, and putting yourself in a box. So a lot of you know that back in the day when I was a full-time musician and I was pursuing a music career, we would do things like interviews, and we would do things like interviews on radio stations. And inevitably, at some point, somebody would ask the question, well, how would you label your music? And I would always sort of bristle at that question because I don't want to label my music. I want people to come to their own conclusions, right? If I tell you what I'm thinking about my music, or I say, it's jazz, it's rock and roll, it's whatever, you're going to go into that with a preconceived notion because you already know how you feel about that type of music. Now, I was raised listening to rock and roll, but when I went to Berklee, it was very much focused on jazz. I took classes in classical music. I did a lot of different things, blues. So I feel like a lot of that is incorporated into what I do as a musician. And I'll tell you a quick story. I vividly remember this at an after party for our second album. I had written one song on that album that was very different than other songs. I was playing around with different chord progressions, and it was not a rock and roll sounding song. I mean, I thought it was, but it was just very different. It was a standout song on the album. And I remember at the after party, there were about 20 or 25 people. And normally at an after party, you put the record on and you put it on in the background and people just make, small talk and kind of mingle and everything. But the music is playing in the background. And usually people are asking you questions about the material because they're hearing it for the first time, or maybe they heard it live that night and now they're hearing it for the first time recorded. And I remember when this song came on, several people came up to me and said, this doesn't sound like you. And I thought that was a really funny comment because, well, it was me. So maybe it didn't sound like your perception of me, but it actually was me. So therefore it did sound like me. I hope you can see where I'm going with this. I'm going to try to connect this with what we're experiencing today. What I mean by this is that when you start to put yourself in a box or label yourself or allow somebody else to label you, it's a sort of human thing to start to think in those terms without actually really digging into your own thought process or really assessing a situation for what it is, right? You're adhering to the labels that either have been applied to you or even worse, that you've applied to yourself. So I was always against labeling my own music, and it's the same thing now politically for me. I've always been an independent my entire life because my truth has always kind of been the same. Now, I've adjusted course when new information comes my way and I have different life experiences, but to me, the truth is the truth. And if somebody is aligned with what I feel is the truth, then I'll support them. And if they're not, then I won't. And it doesn't matter to me what political party they belong to or whatever other label that we apply to things in society. And so where am I going with this? Well, in this article, and I'm not going to bring up this exact article. This was just a headline that I wanted to show you guys. Let's hear. So again, MAGA influencers may have been paid to break with RFK, but I actually want to go through a story with you. Right-wing accounts got caught shilling for pop companies over the weekend. Now, full disclosure, I don't actually know many of these accounts. You can see them up here. not Jerome Powell, Ian Miles Chong. I know that account, Chad Prather, Clown World, Eric Doherty. But I know that people have used these as sources of information in the past. I don't follow any of them, but they're big accounts in the sort of more conservative and even the Make America Healthy Again movement. So I thought it was important to address this because Daryl and I spoke about this bill that was going through the Texas House and Senate, whether to ban sodas from SNAP programs. And I just think it's really interesting because I'm also going to show you on another slide a fantastic attorney who made a comment about this. And I agree with her. And this is actually where I heard about the story. But first, I just want to go through the story with you just for a moment. So this company is called Influenceable, and the company was caught cutting big checks to influencers on behalf of Big Soda. Again, we're not going to go through the entire article, but if you read some of these posts, they're very similar. They use the similar wording. They have a very similar theme. And that's because it seems like they were handed a script. And this is funny because Ian Miles Chong, someone who did seemingly anyway, was paid by this company, had posted prior to that something that was the complete opposite of that statement. In other words, he was saying things like Coca-Cola subsidizes food stamps. They want you to become fat and addicted to sugar. Okay. Then why are you then opposing the exclusion of soda products on SNAP programs? Well, potentially because you were getting paid to do so. And I think a lot of this is funny. When you see anonymous accounts like Clown World or Not Jerome Powell, you have absolutely no idea who is running said account. They could be Nigerian farmers for all you know. Ian Miles Chong is a Malaysian gamer who earned money by commenting on American politics. Like most of these accounts, he reposts content for smaller accounts to earn money. He also changes his tune whenever the wind, money, blows, at least when it comes to pop and welfare benefits. And this is what I mean about, these, you can call yourself a conservative or a MAGA or MAHA or whatever it is, right? And I'm not even necessarily saying that these labels are negative. But what I am saying is that if you label yourself something and then somebody comes along and says, I'm an influencer for this movement, you are more inclined to just believe them or even to side with them in an argument without taking into account how you feel about something. And this is something that I've worked on very hard. In other words, there are a lot of people out there in the movements that I believe in that I do trust and that I do like and that I do go to for information. But I also am completely willing to part ways with their point of view if I feel like they've gotten something wrong. And this is, I guess, the lesson that I want to deliver here with this short little episode. And Daryl and I are going to talk about this a lot more next time we're together. But I just think this is super important. And to prove that this is actually fact, Eric Doherty, he actually admitted that he got paid for doing this. And he said, yeah, that was dumb of me. Massive egg on my face. In all seriousness, it won't happen again. But I would say to Eric Doherty, yeah, massive egg on your face and it won't happen again. Well, how do we know that? You didn't admit this until you were exposed. You didn't come out and say, I'm taking money to put this opinion out here. And that's the biggest problem. I don't even have a problem with people putting their opinion online for money, but you must let people know that you are being paid for this. That is where I draw the line, because I have been approached by multiple campaigns. I don't mean political campaigns. I should restate. I've been pursued to help pitch certain products and adhere to a certain marketing campaign. And I refuse to let anybody pay me to write the words that are going to come out of my mouth. I'm even less likely to do that, even if I believe in the product. It just doesn't feel right to me. And maybe that's my own shortcoming and why I don't make as much money as these people do. And I'll show you, let's see. These influencers were given a couple templates to use by Influenceable. And with one of those templates specifically telling them to mention Trump's Diet Coke habit. In other words, well, this is completely discordant with Donald Trump, who drinks, diet soda. And they talked about the proposed ban on, or soda tax in New York City, which I was against because there's a huge difference here. When you're talking about using taxpayer money to fund soft drinks or charging people more money for a food they want to buy that's coming from their own earnings, right? There's a big difference there. I'm not in favor of that because I can see how it would be very easy for them to say, well, soda has a tax on it. Well, now we're going to put a tax on red meat because everybody knows red meat is bad for you. right? So now you're at the whim of whatever the government decides is bad for you. I'm completely against that. This is different. This is taxpayer money. And I don't think taxpayer money should be used to subsidize foods that we know are harmful for people. And so here's more details on this. And they even show you some of the screenshots from the website and what the campaign key messaging points are: government overreach, personal choice and freedom, economic concerns, Trump's preference for Diet Coke, Trump's voter base, their preference. So this is all very, I mean, it's really underhanded. And when you think about them getting potentially $1,000 per post to oppose the push to remove sugary drinks from welfare benefits. I mean, if you post, I don't know, 5 times a week, that's $5,000 a week. That's $20,000 a month. That's a lot of money. And this is just one campaign. So now you have to think, what other campaigns are we not aware of that these influencers are just mimicking the talking points without actually thinking for themselves? So I just think this is a real problem. And now I want to talk about the tweet that actually made me aware of this story. This is from KrisAnne Hall, the constitutional attorney. She said, here's the undeniable reality. If you take money from the government, your spending will be regulated, full stop. If you don't want oversight, audits, or strings attached, don't take the money. It's that simple. This isn't complicated, nor is it new. It has always worked this way and always will. Why? Because when the government gives money, it is not handing out its own wealth. It's redistributing taxpayer dollars, and with that comes a fiduciary duty to track, regulate, and control how those funds are used. You may not like how it was controlled. You may not like who was doing the controlling, but that changes nothing. What was once a responsibility has morphed into raw power, but the principle remains: government money comes with government control. If you don't want bureaucrats dictating your spending, don't take the handout. This is an absolute, indisputable truth. And I completely agree. And the last thing I want to show you is this. Riley Gaines was also offered money to do this, but she refused. She put out a post on March 22nd that said, they offered to pay me to post. A big fat heck no. And of course, Robert Kennedy responded, thank you for your integrity, Riley. It's troubling that some companies now think they have the right to demand taxpayer money to poison our children. And what's even worse, in my opinion, is that they are paying influencers to mold public opinion. And so to go back to the beginning, if you put yourself in that box, if you put yourself in the Make America Healthy Again box, which I do, I would say there are a variety of ways to get there. And there are a variety of unethical ways to get there. And there are a variety of people who will take advantage of people who genuinely want to make a country or a society healthy again and just make money in the process. And that's what I think we have going on here. So would I tell you that, some of these accounts, maybe they truly believe what they're saying. Maybe they truly don't have a problem with taxpayer money being used to fund soda habits. If that's the case, that's fine. Then they still should have let you know that they were being paid to do this. But I have a sneaking suspicion that many of them just took the $1,000 per post paycheck. And again, this is one campaign. This is how these people make their money. They're influencers, a term that I completely despise. Be an educator, be an advocate, be a variety of things. But an influencer it just seems so shallow to me. So we're going to talk more about this next time. But I just wanted to highlight this because we had just spoken about this Texas bill. We were very happy to see this. And then just days later, this sort of exploded. But what's interesting is that it really wasn't covered on any kind of real mainstream media outlets that I could see, not to any real degree. It was mostly a social media phenomenon, which makes sense because these were social media influencers. But they also tended to be, Trump supporting right wing, which again, put yourself in that box if you want to. I just refuse. I've never been a Republican. I won't ever register Republican. I don't want to be a Democrat. I'm an independent. Every chance I get, I try to be independent. There are movements that I agree with. But again, once something happens in that movement that I disagree with, I'll be the first person to stand up. And I just wish that more people would do that because I think that we would actually get to results. We would get to truth. And I don't think any of these people are necessarily seeking truth. They're seeking a paycheck. And while I'm fully in favor of people making money however they want, lying to people about how you're making your money is wrong. If you're so proud of this stance you're taking, tell people, yeah, this soda company or this company that is sponsored by soda companies really, it really means something to me personally. And so I'm going to take some money and I'm going to use my platform in order to help influence the public. But that's not what's happening here. They're making it seem like these points of view are truly and genuinely their own. And when you do something like that, well, then I have a serious problem with it. So let's call it a day there, guys. We'll be back next week with a full episode. We're going to talk about several things, but I really do want to dig into this also with Daryl, because influencers are really interesting. And Daryl and I do have a large social media presence, not as large as some of these people, but a large enough social media presence where some people could consider us influencers. And I want to have this discussion on what we can do to prevent being looked upon that way. I think mostly what we do here is that hedge against that. In other words, telling people, don't trust me, think for yourself, read for yourself, but also articulating our points of view on things. And you'll also realize, if you follow myself or Daryl, that we're not hawking products to you. We'll tell you what we use. We'll tell you things that we find valuable. And if we are making money off something, we'll certainly tell you that as well, which is to say that we're not making very much money off any of these social media things we do. We do this for the love of education, and potentially to bring in clients, which is a way to make money. But just to make money off the advertising aspect for both of us has always felt a little strange. We've talked about that before. We're going to talk about it again. But thanks for hanging out today in this little short video on this Sunday. But we'll be back next time. We'll go into this more. We're going to go into a few other papers and whatever else comes up between now and then. So again, thanks for hanging out, and we'll talk to you soon.